This week on the 77% Street Debate.
There are countless of people who have gotten into jail as a result of the work I do. So you are metamorphosizing from the journalistic point into the activist point.
Doesn't that make you judge, jury, and executioner then?
You can't do journalism that is impactful going by the books. And that is why I have no business fitting into the mold of activism.
Fine words, but they don't cut.
For you.
People want to see change.
My brother, you're talking about the work that made my mother have to flee, made my brothers have to flee with their families. Nigeria has different laws that have been changed. If that's not changed, then my name is not Rona.
Hello and welcome back to the 77% Street Debate. This week, we are neither in Africa nor on the streets. We are home to the Global Media Forum, one of the leading media forums globally. Thank you. Thank you. It's no secret for those of you who live in Africa that our media spaces are usually either not free or independent. And for that reason, some journalists are forced to do a work that they did not sign up for, activism. So today we're going to ask, where is that line, if there is one in Africa, between journalism and activism? And today I have a gorgeous panel here with me. Look at those African colors. Anas, let's start with you. What is activism in your mind, and how does it differ from journalism? And can those two always be separated?
Journalism puts you in that space where you get into activism, not because you want to, but you find yourself in that space.
So what's the difference?
The kind of journalism I do is naming, shaming, and jailing. And in navigating across that path, I go for hardcore evidence. I go undercover. I go into the court of law, and then I testify. To tell people, to show to people. So I don't believe in exclusive journalism. I believe in journalism that impacts on the society. So my journalism is a product of the society. And it works because I managed to get people into jail. And there are countless of people who have gotten into jail as a result of the work I do. So you can call me an activist, but I do my journalism, and it dovetails into activism.
How do you define yourself, though? Do you see yourself more as an activist or as a journalist?
I see myself more as an activist because of the end product that I get.
Okay, Ruana, do you find yourself in these situations as well, where your work sort of places you in situations that you didn't necessarily sign up for?
Yes, I do, and I absolutely refuse that tag, activist. I shy away from it, I run away from it.
Why?
Because there's different types of activists, and I think if you're not clear the type of activist you are, that's when you do get into trouble. And that line can be thin, I agree with Anas, but for me, I also see it as a very big, thick line. It's a big ass, pardon my French, thick line. So for example, we have different types of activists. You are either an activist based on your personal conviction, or you are pronounced an activist by your job or by the government of the day who's upset at what you're doing. People can also be activists because of the attention economy, where there's this increasing tabloidization of news, and they have to perform, in a way, activism as journalists. And then finally, I think people can be activists, journalists can be activists out of greed. Because
out of greed?
Yes, correct. I said so. I said what I said.
Okay. Anas, you have something to add to that?
I totally disagree with her because I think that she's not looking at the dangers we face. There's no point in doing a piece of journalism and getting up and walking up on the same street with that criminal. I say I will take you to jail. I testify. I show the hardcore evidence. And I'm speaking from a point of view of being a lawyer. And I say that every miscalculation in undercover journalism can lead to death, can lead to fatal consequences. We don't become activists because we love it. Journalism is not a tea party. It's a serious business.
I do have a rebuttal. I have to say, I look at activism from the perspective of the daughter of a journalist who was killed for being a journalist. So I know firsthand what it means. My own father was killed 15 years ago for being a journalist. He wasn't even an investigative journalist. So you can even get killed for being a columnist, apparently, for having an opinion. I know what it is. I had to send my family out of the country when I did Sweet Sweet Codeine, for example. They know what to do.
For our audience, can you please tell us what Sweet Sweet Codeine was about?
So Sweet Sweet Codeine was an investigation into the pharmaceutical cartels that sell codeine, and it was undercover as well. And laws were changed codeine was banned within 24 hours, and we're still seeing some of the benefits, although that doesn't stop drugs. People move on to other drugs. But I say this to say, I have a clear, and I'm living with the fact that a family member died. I'm always watching my back. Nobody knows I was coming to Bonn, for example. I just show up and I post stuff down on social media. But I say this to say, when you mix this activism, the problems that come with it means it's no longer journalism. The way Anas does it is very different, but I'm talking about the popular way.
We'll talk about the stylistic devices later, but I don't think we have answered that question yet. Naomi, maybe you can help me. And speaking about fathers who've been jailed because of journalism, yours is one of them.
Yeah.
So the shrinking media space in Benin, do you see yourself more as an activist or as a journalist? Because you're caught in between these worlds, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think I would rather define myself as an activist, and I'm not ashamed.
So you see yourself first as an activist, then as a journalist?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I believe you don't have to be a journalist to be an activist. So I am a daughter of an activist. He is a journalist. He has founded the private press, the first private press group in Benin, and he was always seen as an activist. He was under police custody billion times, and he's still standing, and I thank God for that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to follow the path, but also to have my own personality.
Identity.
Yes, identity as well. But I'm a journalist, but I'm also an activist. But I have to be careful. Of course.
Okay, so we've heard some impressions from Benin, Nigeria, and Ghana, but we also asked people from around the continent. Our colleagues went around asking them, how is the media space in your country? And this is what they had to say.
In Uganda, sometimes the line between journalism and activism can be blurred. For instance, many media organizations are owned by politicians with an agenda. Now, these employers are said to have a big influence on the reporting by the journalists they hire. Sometimes when criticized, politicians instead accuse journalists of being activists. President Yoweri Museveni has previously described private media outlets as enemies, but also some colleagues in the media profession have willfully joined partisan politics. Today, some of the most prominent politicians, both in the government and the opposition, started off as journalists.
With several newspapers and over 150 TV and radio channels, Kenya has a pretty diverse media landscape. And while there are close links between politics and media ownership, the press here is still relatively free and able to criticize authorities. One famous Kenyan example of an activist journalist is that of Boniface Mwangi, a photographer who turned to activism after his experience of reporting on Kenya's post-election violence. He was later known for driving pigs all the way to Parliament and coining the word M-Pigs for overindulging members of Parliament. And so, while criticizing the powers that be may not always be easy in Kenya, it's still a task that many journalists take on.
Corruption by politicians and public officials is a major problem in Ghana. It affects the ordinary person who lacks potable water, good road, quality health care, quality education, and many more. Now, reporting about these issues are the duties of journalists. And that was exactly what Ghanaian journalist Anas Arimeyawanas started early on in his career over 2 decades ago. But getting concrete evidence to prosecute such officials meant he had to go undercover. Now, he didn't just become a journalist in doing that, but an anti-corruption activist who was hated by government, with some public officials declaring him an enemy of the state and a persona non grata. Anas hasn't become just a multimedia documentary maker, but now a leading activist who the ordinary people look up to for solace in protecting them from the corrupt and abusers.
We've just seen there that Anas, you've been mentioned, and so just to contextualize, why is it that journalists, specifically in Africa, are turned into activists? I'm just trying to figure out sort of like what the social changes are that you are calling for and why the journalist is the one to do it.
I think that, first of all, the journalist is much more closer to the people. You listen to them, and you realize that normal journalism doesn't cut. I believe in being thorough and doing a piece of work and seeing to the benefits, what society derives from that piece of work. And so if I have done normal journalism, which would have been just published. And
what's normal journalism?
So normal journalism would mean that you have identified your sources, you've gotten the information, you've put it out there, and you can allow the rest of the state institutions to take care of it. But I'm saying that state institutions are equally handicapped as we are as journalists. So I don't see anything wrong with taking one step forward to meet a prosecutor. I do not possess police powers of arrest. If I find that criminal at that corner wanting to kill that baby, there's nothing wrong with putting our hands together and ensuring that that guy is busted. And I don't see anything wrong going to stand before a court of law. If you believe in the piece of work that you have done, why can't you defend it before a court of law?
Okay.
So if I stand there and I'm called an activist, so be it. I'm proud of it and it's good.
All right, so Anas is very proud of the work that he does, saying normal journalism doesn't cut it. Omo, I know you have a different opinion about this.
Well, yes, I do, but it's still in line with what we were discussing in the sense that activism is, like we checked before, it's more about, campaigning actively about something for change, either political or social change, but you want something to change. That's what you're doing, what you're doing. Yes, I agree with the fact that if individuals think that they need to be activists, then let them be and let them be proud and let them mature themselves to find that, okay, I don't need to be an activist anymore. Like, it's important that people are honest about where they are per time, because that's the only way to do good work. Because if you claim to be something else because of what the ideals defined by society and to be politically correct, you are dealing with yourself. At the end of the day, you're going to be alone with yourself at night in your room. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a struggle within yourself and your peace of mind that you lose when you don't own it. So my own point is, whether activism is right or wrong, I'm not going to define that. Whether advocacy is the way to go, I'm not still going to define it. I'm saying if this is where you are now, then be it and be it with your full chest. Yeah, until...
So then how do you maintain integrity, right? So if I'm covering gender issues, I'm a woman, I definitely have a bias on that. How do I make sure there's a line and I'm not just advocating for women and I am just being a journalist?
For every article you write, you run it by somebody else. You should always have accountability partners. You should run it by somebody else to check you. At the end of the day, integrity is important for you. So run it by somebody else, knowing your bias, knowing that you've done it to the best of your own ability. But having an opinion doesn't make you senseless or stupid. You still have a thought process. You can still think through it to say, I still need to find balance to this truth or to this viewpoint. Okay, well, let's hear the other person's side, even if I believe it or not. That's still basics in journalism, or that's a basic tenet in the work we do.
Okay,
personally.
Shirley, I see you nodding. Do you have something to say to me?
I completely agree with some of the sentiments that Omo has.
Some.
No, I'll be clear on the ones that I agree with.
Okay.
I also think that it's two hats between being a journalist and being an activist. Yeah. And like she said, you need to be very transparent and be very honest with yourself and with others when you're switching one hat for the other.
Okay, how do you do that practically, realistically?
Yeah. The other thing I could add to what she said is the matter of conflict of interest. If I'm too emotionally involved in something, and I know that it's going to affect the outcome or the product of whatever I'm doing, then either I step back if I cannot be clear-minded when I'm doing it, or I have accountability partners, as she said.
Okay, so Anas, back to you. Omo, you have something to say to me?
Yeah.
Jump in.
Yeah, okay. So the thing now is that I've been asking myself, this tenets of journalism, was it God that made it or was it men? At the end of the day, society, we can't pretend that we understand life. We're so different and so diverse, and we still cannot fully understand who we are. And so, yes, I know we need these guidances, but my own point of view, every time we talk about the tenets of journalism, and I agree with them, I came into the profession, but then I thought to myself, journalism was made for man. Man wasn't made for journalism. So at the end of the day, we should still be able to make some changes as we go on in society. So, yeah, there are tenets. Yes, there are guides, but...
Isn't that dangerous, though? I mean, at what point do you throw out objectivity?
Yeah. At the end of the day, you still need to put into consideration your ethical values, your morals, what you know, what you inherently believe in, because I feel like those things come to play in every profession, whether journalism, whether football. Who you are inherently comes across in everything you do. And I'm a photographer, and the heart with which I take my pictures always shows in my pictures, and I don't know how, but it does. So I'm saying that who you are will always reflect in the work you do. So yes, it could be dangerous. I haven't been in this space to cover stuff like that, but I'm saying that the honesty in yourself to know that, okay, this is what I'm willing to do, and I'm willing to take a risk. The world so far has evolved by risks that were taken by different people.
Agreed.
I think we are making a huge mistake by letting people define what journalism is for us. Journalism is not about any Ivy League school sitting down and putting out terms. Journalism should be defined by your society. At the end of the day, how does the work you do lead to the progress of that society? So what might be journalism, good journalism in America, might be the different type of journalism in Africa.
So what kind of journalism would you suggest we have in Africa?
I am suggesting that your journalism should be defined by your people. If your people need good drinking water, get that for them. Whatever it takes to get that for them, get it for them. If it means that you have to go undercover and get it for them, go get it for them.
Oh, Ruona is really disagreeing with you. Let me hear your voice.
And that's my brother from the neighboring country. I disagree with you so much. And it is not because I don't agree with the fact that norms in journalism have traditionally been dictated by the West, so to speak. I agree with that. It is it even translates all the way from the newsrooms into the academic. We do need some level, wherever that comes from, it doesn't matter. We do need some level of standards.
Yeah.
And those standards dictate that there should be a very clear line on what is and what is not. For example, what will then differentiate us from the publics we cover? If we sound the same way, if we don't have any types of standards. I mean, just imagine if there was no standard for the type of drinking water we have in the world. Then it would be okay to keep drinking lead water that was drunk centuries ago and probably still being drunk now.
Yeah, I mean, I get your point. Hold on, Anas. Naomi, I want to come to you because let's just ground ourselves in reality here, right? We have the tenets of journalism, perfect. But even with that standardization, it still becomes difficult to practice in, say, a country like yours. So are you allowed to color the line outside the lines then?
Well, actually, I'm not really allowed, but I do.
Rebel.
Yes. I'm really on social media, so I am working for a TV press group, of course, but on the side, I write what I think on my social media platform. And on my social media platform, I am myself, and I can say whatever I want.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you able to separate your identity as a journalist from your online personality?
Yeah, definitely.
How do you do that? Because when I see you online, I'll see the journalist, Naomi.
Yes, you see the journalist, but I do it a different way. When I'm a TV presenter, for example, I have to follow the rules. I just come to give facts, that's all. On my social media platform, I comment the fact. I say my mind, but not in a way that will put me in a dangerous situation.
So you're dipping your toes between activism and journalism, right?
Yes, I'm in the middle.
Yeah, but Anas, doesn't this make it a very dangerous situation then? Because we have the rules, but then we're saying we can break them when it's not convenient for us, or when the society does not have structures for us. And we're saying, oh, by the way, when I'm out of the newsroom, then I can say whatever I want.
You have to ask yourself, how do I do my work in a way that it can cut? And getting it to cut means that you are metamorphosizing from the journalistic point into the activist point.
Doesn't that make you judge, jury, and executioner then?
It doesn't, because at the end of the day, whatever evidence you produce, at the end of the day, there will be a court of law that will sit down and adjudicate over it. I have taken so many people into jail, and I did it with my own work. They had their own lawyers, and I love it because it's also a test of your integrity, a test of how honest your journalism is. Everybody should be given an opportunity to come and defend himself. This is your video. This is how you stole it. This is how you plan to steal it, and answer to it. I think that should be the way out.
Okay, Ruona, the question is for you. On the issue of trust, you might be well-meaning, and perhaps you want to talk about Codeine, and then your younger audiences say, she always leans towards one side. She's anti-government, she's anti-this. How do you balance that out?
So you balance it again by those set of rules that are journalistic, that are ethical. I think one point needs to be made. Impactful journalism is not always done in an activist manner. I'm not an activist. I do not identify as one. I will never identify as one.
Can you tell me why? I mean, this is something that is very deeply rooted in you. You're like, I don't like this word.
You're getting the vibes, aren't you?
Yes, the vibes are strong.
I find activism distracts me. When I have to actively care about what people say or about my methods to the extent where I cannot control it, there's no quality control, for example, in my mind, then I have a problem. I will say that you can do journalism that is impactful going by the books, and it is still impactful. I'm an example of that. When I did Codeine, people were very happy laws were being changed, but guess what? There were still people that came to say, I was paid by a foreign government because my surname is German. So I still got that flack, and there were people that were still saying, I am an activist for a different cause. And this points to the fact of extremism. You will always be called an activist whichever way you do your journalism. And that is why I refuse it, because I have no business being called or fitting into the mold of activism.
Fine words, but they don't cut.
Oh. For you.
Yes, because if I was doing codeine, for example, my aim would have been putting this, and it's a brilliant piece of work.
But does it take away, if somebody doesn't go to jail, does it take away from the work that she did?
It doesn't take away, but people want to see change.
But change
in our
happened.
society.
And I have to say,
change would
you're
happen
talking about
legislatively, but I'm saying
my
that's
brother,
okay.
You're talking about the work that made my mother have to flee, made my brothers have to flee with their families. I have a stake, and I'm going to say change came. Nigeria has different laws that have been changed. Ports were opened, offices were opened in the ports, codeine ledgers for pharmaceutical companies were reenacted. If that's not change, then my name is not Rona.
That is.
So I'd like to hear from you all. Based on what we've heard here today, do you still believe that there's that line between journalism and activism, or have you shifted a little bit? Let's say your final thoughts, Naomi.
I won't change my mind. I still believe, as a journalist, you need to speak about the facts. But you can't just speak the facts. For example, if there's a story happening and you know that it's not the truth, but the government, for example, is giving a version of it, you need to say out loud that this is not true. You're becoming an activist somehow. You still need to follow the rules. I do agree with her. You need to follow the rules of journalism, not to be in danger, but you need to make the public understand that the story is not quite right.
Okay. Let's hear from you, Shirley.
I maintain that there is a line. And for me, what would be important is that transparency, that we know which side you're on. If you're a journalist and you're an activist, you're a journalist, whichever hat you're putting on at whatever time, let it be clear to your audience or to whoever is listening to you. Because as a media personnel or as a journalist, you have so much power. There's so many people looking at you, listening to you, some even hanging on to your very word. Like everything you say, they take it as it is. Yeah.
Okay. Omu.
Yeah, it's fine. Yes, my own point is we will keep evolving as human beings, right?
Indeed.
So as journalists, as activists, as advocates, the idea is the end goal is change, political, social, whatever change it is we're trying to drive for. But in looking at the next generation or younger people who are thinking to come into journalism, I think what drives you is key. For Anna, she talks like it's a calling, like this is it, I must see you in jail. For Rona, she doesn't have to see you in jail, but she has to just expose the story. Yeah. But you who's coming into it, you need to ask yourself, why? Are you coming for the accolades or for the awards? Because yes, do a good job, you'll be nominated for an Emmy. Yeah, but that's not why you do it. Because at the end of the day, there's no need. Yeah. You're unable to sleep with, we've had journalists win awards and lose peace because the story didn't feel right to win an award for. You won an award for telling the story about George Floyd's death. It doesn't sit right. So as a young person who's deciding, okay, I like to see people in jail, so I'm going to become a journalist and lock people up like Anas and be great and cover my face. If that's what you want to do, then, but you need to consider why. Yeah. You need to know to what extent. You need to be honest that you like the attention and the accolades, or you know what, I'm going to do this because it's the right thing to do for my society.
Okay, motivation being the key. I like how you're getting it from your gut. All right, Rona.
So for me, when I started coding, it was like, let's get justice. I had a brother who was an addict. So that was what motivated me. It wasn't any award. I didn't know the Emmy was going to come. Yeah. But for me, more important is the solution. We need to overcome the divisions that this debate brings up in our practice, in our newsroom practice. So I want to see editors actually sit people down. But we don't see journalists. Older journalists don't even engage. They just say you're an activist, you don't know how to do journalism, the younger ones should leave. And I'm sort of in the middle because I'm not young, but I'm not old either, just saying. And so I feel we should try to overcome these divisions. Activism is not a banned word. It's not something that we cannot speak about. But as she says, let's be transparent and let's try to avoid polarizing ourselves because the audiences and the propagandist governments are already doing that outside the newsroom.
All right. And last but not least.
So I learned part of my journalism here in Germany. I trained under Gunther Warraff, one of the world's famous undercover journalists. I've also learned from the BBC Ofcom rules, apart from that the GJA Code of Ethics guides me as I work. So at the end of the day, I believe that we should ask ourselves that question when we get into our spaces, that how do I ensure that I get developmental journalism? Again, I see a youthful trend. I see the youth, and I want to emphasize that the African youth they are tired of the rotten system. And they want to see a change. And if we want to truly impact on our various countries, then we have to move towards more activism. And I don't see any line between journalism and activism.
Anas, thank you so much. Thank you to our audience. At the beginning of this debate, we asked a very simple question. Where is the line between activism and journalism? And as one of the people here said, it's just proper chaos when you try to define those terms. Thank you all to our lovely audience here. Thank you to our panelists. And as usual, thank you for watching.